Welcome to the Love Systems Podcast, where we talk about everything from lifestyle to fitness to game. We bring you the best instructors with the best tidbits and information on a regular basis so that you can improve your life and ultimately get the girl of your dreams.
Love, love, love systems. Love, 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 love systems. Love, love, love systems. Love, 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 love systems.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Love Systems Podcast. I'm your host today, Hootie. You can tell I sound a little congested. That's because I'm very under the weather, but I'm fighting it off with a healthy dose of caffeine and positive attitude, something like that. So I'm coming along today, and I've got a phenomenal guest on the show. He is one of the longest standing instructors at Love Systems, and it just has phenomenal game. He is the winner of a really cool show called The Keys to the VIP. It's basically a TV show all about these different dating challenges and pickup challenges, and he annihilated when he was on the show. He's also the author of The Gentleman's Guide to Online Dating, so of course we're going to chat about that as well. He's a drinker of fine spirits, a true and tried beard connoisseur. He's also a francophone. Il parle un peu de français, je parle un peu aussi, but we're going to keep this interview primarily in English for all you guys who are obviously English speakers. So without further ado, Cajun, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, man. Tout l'accent, c'est très bien pour le français.
Mon professeur de français, on disait, elle habite en Paris she lived in France, whatever, she was born and raised. So I think she helped me develop a good accent. That's basically the extent of my French. I just threw it all out there, and that's pretty much all I can remember.
Pretty good. You actually sound like you speak French, like you had the accent down pat. That's pretty much half of it, especially if you're talking to French people outside of North America. So
yeah,
good work.
I can fake it pretty well for like 20 seconds, and then I just go blank.
There you go. That's all you need. So yeah, thanks for having me on the show, man. It's I'm looking forward to this. I think it's gonna be a blast.
I'm really excited. In fact, so there's a couple of reasons why I'm super stoked to have you on. Probably the biggest reason is because of your expertise in body language, but we're gonna get back to that. The real reason why I'm super excited is because when I first was introduced to Love Systems and to game long time ago, it was through my friend Jasper, who's also an LS coach and a fine Dutchman. But he basically, the way I was introduced was he goes like, dude, you got to check this out. This stuff's for real. And I'm like, okay, what? He's like, check out the show, Keys to the VIP. And then I basically saw Cajun take on was it your nephew or your cousin?
It was my cousin.
It was your cousin. Yeah, basically take on your cousin, and it was pretty awesome. It was super fun. So for any of you guys who haven't seen this episode, check it out on YouTube. Pretty sure it's still up there. Just Google or search on YouTube Keys to the VIP space Cajun, and you'll check it out. Check out all his antics, and it's hilarious. But more than hilarious, it's impressive.
Right on. Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into dating coaching.
Yeah. Well, I'd moved to Toronto after university. Toronto is kind of where a lot of this stuff kind of came out of. It's kind of like the birthplace of game in a way. A lot of the big guys came from Toronto. Mystery himself, and then Tyler Durden, and Savoy and Ten Magnet and a bunch of other guys. And so what happened was I had moved there, and after university, didn't really know how to pick up girls outside of just getting drunk and kind of like shaking up on them. Like any other, early 20-year-old guy. So I had met a guy going out one night who said he reminded me of a buddy of his that used to go out and use lines on girls. I had just read the game actually that night, so I was using some of the stuff I'd read from that book on girls, and it was working. And so anyway, so he just kind of said, I reminded him of a guy he used to hang out with. This guy that he used to hang out with ended up being Mystery, which he didn't know was Mystery from famed character in the game. And since I just read the game, I came to the conclusion pretty quick he was talking about the same guy. So we ended up becoming friends. This was Sasha Daygame, who's another PUA kind of coach guy out of Europe, and so we started going out all the time, and we didn't really read a lot of forums or any advice or anything like that. We just basically went out and fucked around with girls, saying funny stuff, trying different things. We'd write little notes, and at the end of the night, compare our notes and see what worked and what didn't. And over the course of about 7 or 8 months, going out, 3 or 4, sometimes 5 nights a week, we got pretty good enough that we were getting kind of recognized in Toronto, which, although it's the largest Canadian city, in terms of the bar scenes, was small enough that you could recognize the same guys if you go out all the time. So, guys would see us pinging around the room, talking to girls and getting makeouts, getting numbers and stuff. And I thought, well, these guys know what they're doing. So we started giving advice to these guys. And eventually, Mystery and some of the other guys from what was then the VH1 show were coming into town. And he had called Sasha and basically said, oh, why don't we all hang out? And so we did. I tried to impress him with my game. Didn't really work. I was having a particular bad night that night. But I ended up meeting some of the other guys that I eventually ran into again a couple months later. 10 Magnet being one, Chris Shepard. And so I ran into him again a couple months later and kind of impressed him then. And he invited me to come along to one of his boot camps that was happening in San Francisco about a week later. So I went along to that. That was in 2006. And then I've been teaching ever since then. So yeah, it was kind of a bit of fate mixed in with hard work and lots of practice.
Right on. Now, how did you develop we got to talk about body language, because that is something that I have spent a lot of time researching. And of course, my book, Body Talk, is coming out in August. But tell us, how did you get interested in body language, and how did you start learning about it and getting so knowledgeable?
Right. So what happened was, when I was going out, I found my best nights when I was getting the best reactions from girls. When I'd look back on them, sort of, think in hindsight what it was that attracted them, I kept finding that it was mostly, it was being in state. And any guy that does this long enough, the guys that are really good, know that, having good game is mostly being able to manage your state. And I found that a lot of the things that I was doing when I was in state that was attracting girls was mostly my body language. It wasn't necessarily the things I was saying. It was mostly how I was moving, how I was touching, and how I was escalating and reacting and all that sort of stuff. So I figured, well, if this is, what seems to be the majority of what's getting the best reactions from girls, I may as well start focusing on it, studying it. So I turned to the guys that I thought had the best body language in the world. For me, I thought that was probably rock stars. So I started looking at rock stars and trying to get a more sexual aspect to my body language. So I was looking at guys like Mick Jagger, and I was looking, from Rolling Stones, obviously Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy, Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin, and I didn't really get too much from them. I know a lot of them were just sort of focusing on, like Mick Jagger would dance around, Robert Plant would show his chest and wear tight pants, and it didn't really work too well. So I started looking at other guys. Jim Morrison was really good. I got a lot of stuff from him. Then I started looking at some actors and stuff too. Warren Beatty was a big inspiration for me, as well as Errol Flynn even. Who else? Geez. There's so many guys. I started researching all this sort of stuff. One that sticks out, Billy Joel, actually was a huge man. That guy has some of the best body language I've ever seen. I never actually really liked him when I was younger because my mom liked him, and just because your mom likes music, you tend to hate it. And I thought he was gay, so I thought, well, he's not someone I'm going to need to really look at. But then I started reading about him, and it was like, man, he's dated or married the who's who of supermodels, spanning the years, 1980 to currently. So, it's one thing to get really hot girls when you're a musician, even a popular musician, but it's another thing to land supermodels, and especially, consecutively, pretty much all of them. And I thought that was particularly impressive. And Billy Joel's an ugly guy. So I was thinking he must have something. There must be something I'm missing here. And, he's short too. So I figured, well, this might be a good guy to learn from because I'm short. So I literally looked up some interviews with him on YouTube, and immediately within 5 seconds of watching it, I was like, motherfucker, he's so charming. He's the most charming guy I've ever seen. So he was really interesting. But then I looked at other guys, like Rick Ocasek was the singer for the Cars. Ugly motherfucker as well. Ended up, marrying the Russian model that's in the video for Drive, which was a big hit in the 80s, and literally one of the hottest girls I've ever seen. So I thought, okay, this guy must know something too because he's ugly as fuck, and him as well, really really charming interviews. So I just started watching as much stuff as I could find from all these guys, and I started to break it down what they were doing, whether it was intentional or not from them. And that became sort of the basis of my body language studies. And, I broke it down into 3 different categories, one being sexual presence, the second being restraint, and the third being subtext. And that's sort of how I went about it. I was pretty methodical about it, and tried to find the things that they all had in common, and ended up stealing a lot of them. And yeah, that's kind of how I came up with it. The number one guy though is Marlon Brando for sure. The actor, did method acting and stuff in the 50s and I guess probably 40s too, and into the 60s. He was the guy that I think I learned the most from out of anyone, because it just seemed like every single thing he did was perfect. Like I could use every single thing that he did, as opposed to only snippets and pieces from, which is pretty much what it was with the other guys. So yeah, that's kind of how my studying kind of went about.
It's cool. If you ever hear, we have an interview with Versetti. I think it's episode number 2 or 3 or something like that, where he talks about body language. A lot of actors, because a big part of major component of communication, especially when you are trying to convey emotions, is all about body language. So actors, especially classically trained actors, are often really astute and really just spot on when trying to get these messages across. And one of the things I want to point out too is you might be tempted to think that, especially as you kind of gave a list of all these different celebrities and superstars that have these amazingly hot wives, you may be tempted to think, well, yeah, but they're celebrities, they're superstars. But I live in LA, and what I found with a lot of these guys that I've gotten to know who are maybe on the verge of getting big or maybe still not there yet, I really think that a lot of times the body language and all these positive beliefs and the way they think about themselves, what a lot of my friends refer to as a star quality, it precedes the fame. I have a buddy of mine, Conrad, he's now blowing up across the globe, and he's Australian. And I guarantee you, like, if you might be tempted to think now all these things are happening and he's starting to have relationships with all these beautiful girls. It was happening way before any of this stuff. It was happening when he was just staying at his manager's house, because he just always had that. He's also a short guy too, and he just had this amazing body language and presence that just oozed not only masculinity but confidence. So I think that's an important thing to point out, that it's a great place to start, because these guys don't just develop this persona and this confidence after they're famous. Maybe some do, but a lot of them, it's a part of them, and that's what helped to propel them to these great heights.
Yeah, you got to think too, they're in different circles, in their circles, being famous doesn't mean much. So, if they're going to get the hottest girls in their circles, it really comes down to game once again, as opposed to just being, a celebrity. So
that's absolutely true too. Once you start going for the women that are already in their circles, yeah, it's no longer like all the guys that they have options that they could potentially date are all famous or well-to-do or whatnot. Yeah, so that's a great one as well. So when we're talking about, let's take normal guys going out and trying to meet girls randomly. What are some of the major mistakes that you see guys making?
So I used to one of the first things I teach guys when I'm doing, let's say, consults or even boot camps and stuff, is I try to think, and this is sort of, I've actually restructured how I teach based on this sort of stuff. I kind of think, if I had to go back in time to when I first started, when I was a pretty average guy when it came to game and everything else, what are the things that I think would be the most useful in terms of going out the first night or maybe the first couple nights that would have the biggest impact? And I've kind of broken it down into a couple different things. But the number one thing would be just an understanding of how women perceive social interaction, and because it's very different from the way that guys do. And I think a lot of guys don't understand this, and it's that with men, logic equals emotion. So we base our emotions on logic. So something happened and it was good, therefore we feel good, right? And that obviously the reverse of that is true too. If we do something stupid, we did something stupid, therefore we feel stupid. And I'm talking in a social context here. With women, though, it's the opposite. It's emotion equals logic. So it's, I feel weird, therefore something weird happened. Or I feel good, therefore the situation is going good. So it seems like a simple thing, but that really can change how you view social interactions. What I mean by that is, if being in control of your emotion is obviously a huge and it's going to be a huge plus to this. But understanding that if you do make a mistake, if you say something stupid, if you do something stupid, it's not the stupid thing that makes the interaction fall apart. It's how you feel about it that makes the interaction fall apart. So you can say dumb things, or you can do stupid things. You can do things that you probably think are a big mistake. But as long as you don't perceive them as such, as long as you sort of look at them as if like, well, fuck it, I don't care. Like this is going to be hilarious either way. And you go into it without that negative emotion, then often you'll find those situations diffuse pretty quick. And and this is a big secret of the guys that are good, anyone that's ever listened to a natural talking to a girl and actually listened to what he's saying, I mean, if you haven't already, do it because it's pretty hilarious. You'd be pretty amazed to listen to some of the stuff they say because it's not good game. It's nothing you'd write down on a piece of paper and say, "Oh my God, no wonder she fell in love with him or made it with him." That it makes perfect sense. It doesn't. They're talking about dumb shit. It's more about the underlying emotion behind the conversation. That's what you need to be in control of. So too many guys, and this is sort of a great fallacy I think within the industry, is that there is, and it's obviously easier to sell logic to men than it is to sell emotion, because that's obviously much more difficult to control. And if we say, well, here's a line you can use, the benefit of the line is not that it's a line that really even does much. The benefit of the line is that it makes you feel more comfortable. And that's where the power in the line comes from. So there's, I think, understanding that is the first thing towards becoming a guy that's better with game, with girls, I guess, is knowing that if you can control your emotions, which is extremely difficult, by the way, especially guys that obviously don't have a lot of exposure therapy or reference experience to base, how they feel about situations on, that is the number one thing. Control your emotions and you control the situation. But how to put that into practice is where it gets a bit more, you have to get a bit more in depth there. But that would be, just as a general sort of thing, the first thing that I would teach someone is when you're going in, whatever you're thinking, and this is actually an easier way to put it, whatever you're thinking is actually what you're communicating. And women are very, very, very good at picking up subtle emotional cues. So, and they're not even really aware of it in the sense that they can tell you what they're doing. They just get a feeling. And so, you'll often have girls, if you're talking to them, where they'll say, "Oh, I met this guy, Tim, and we just had an instant connection," right? So, I mean, what is that? If you ask them what that is, they probably wouldn't even be able to put it into words. They probably just say, "Oh, well, I just felt really comfortable around him." Okay, well, that gets us a bit closer. The idea here is that Tim, whoever he was, made a point to make himself very comfortable, either naturally because he just was, or he maybe knew to think, okay, well, I know that if I'm nervous or I'm trying too hard at trying to get her to like me, it's not going to work. I'm just going to, be myself. Same advice your mom told you when you were, 14 years old, and talk to her as if maybe she's my best friend that I've already known for a long time, and maybe that made it a lot easier for her to build a connection with you. That's part of it, obviously. There's many parts to it to make it, it gets more complicated than that when you get into escalating and staying out of the friend zone and all that stuff. But at least for creating a connection right off the bat, it's just making her comfortable. Is the most important thing. So that's usually what I try to focus on with guys that are just starting. Sometimes they already have that down. Sometimes guys already know, okay, well, I have no problem making a girl comfortable. I need to know how to escalate her. I need to know how to turn a friendly interaction into a more sexual one. And obviously that gets a bit more complicated when you get to that. But for starting out, yeah, I definitely say being able to control your emotion and, by proxy, controlling the emotion of the people you're speaking with.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, because those emotions, the way you feel, will manifest as subcommunications and body language. And that can, if you are relaxed, as you say, comfortable with what you're saying, your movement will be slow, your smile will be casual. There's all these different pieces that will come together that you may not be aware of. And again, you nailed it right on the head. Women are fantastic observers, usually subconsciously, of course. They couldn't give you a big list of everything you're doing right and wrong, but subconsciously, again, which manifests as a feeling, they're picking up on these little signals and reading whether or not you're uncomfortable. And it's funny, I'm sure you've had this experience as well, but often when I hang out with my buddies from home or just random people whenever I go back to Michigan or LA or whatnot, if they watch me and they see an interaction go well and they'll watch me for a while, they'll come back, or when I come back, the first thing they'll always ask me is, "What did you say? Well, how did you get it started, or what types of things you were saying?" And it's funny, and I'll always tell them, but it's every single guy invariably more or less misses the point, because it wasn't what I said. Like we've done this thing where I'm sure you've done equally ridiculous things where we'll just play around with different ways to break the ice. One of which was like asking girls where the nearest place we could take a dump was, because we had to go really, really badly, and then see how if we could like turn that into an interaction, getting a number and so on and so forth. But you can. I mean, it's really irrelevant as long as you do it with the right body language.
Yeah, and you know what? It's true. Like I think I used the analogy before of like if you're a painter and you just painted this amazing piece, and the first thing one of your other contemporaries asks you is, "Oh, what colors did you use?" It's like that. It doesn't matter what colors that you. I mean, that's kind of the idea behind, what did you say? It's not really about what you said. It's more about the feeling and the emotion and the what was going into it. And I mean, it's not to say that there isn't a power. I think in what you say, obviously there is, and wit and having the right words to escalate a situation are hugely important. But in the grand scheme of things, when it comes to how she's reacting in the first few minutes or seconds, it has really not much to do with the words. Very little. So
one of the things that that to me that you're most famous for is explaining movement, especially movement at a venue, but even out and about, as wanting it to be slow. And the analogy you give is walk as if you're walking underwater. Can you tell us how you came up with that, and also the significance of slow movement?
Right. So, I mean, anyone that's heard I actually got it from Bruce Lee, which I guess it could be kind of obvious if anyone that's read about Bruce Lee. And it's a pretty famous quote where he says, "Be like Wata, my friend." And it's sort of came from that. I was reading Tao of Jeet Kune Do, and he had some kind of philosophical statements in the beginning, and many of which I think he stole from other older Taoist and Buddhist texts and stuff. But that was one that stuck out at me. And, from the point of view of, fighting form, it made a lot of sense. You want to be not constrictive in your movements. You got to be able to flow like water. You got to be able to be, instantly being able to move and react like water would. And so I was thinking when I was out, I actually had my buddies watch me when I was in state, and I asked them, what am I doing? Because a lot of the time you're not even conscious of it. You're so focused on the conversation or the interaction that you're not even paying attention to what you're doing. And so they tell me afterwards, like, well, you were like constantly moving. Like you were never still. There was always a party that was moving. And I thought, that doesn't sound like good game. It sounds like that sounds like a nervous tick or something. Like, no, but you were doing it really slow. You kind of reminded me like water. And so when my buddy said that, I was like, oh man, I was just reading Bruce Lee. So I kind of put the two together, and I was like, maybe there's, an application for that in this as well. And then, it kind of went along with what I'd watched when I saw videos of Jim Morrison, who was someone who I think really took that to heart as well. He would have these slow, languid, purposeful movements where things that would normally have no meaning or emotion behind them all of a sudden had all this emotion, all this meaning, and all this sort of, feeling behind them just because the speed at which he did it. And, something like just taking your hair and moving it out of your eyes. When he would do it coupled with the gaze and the speed and the purposefulness that he did it with, it almost made it like a sexual invitation. And so I thought, well, this is really interesting. Can you really do this with anything? And I come from an acting background as well, like Versetti. And so for me, I remember back and learning about method acting and subtext and stuff when I was in taking acting lessons, and that was a big part of it as well. Where you have to sort of be in the moment is where my director would always scream at me, be in the moment, and there's part of that as well where you have to sort of like feel it. It's not about purposefully doing the movements, which again is another fallacy where it's hard to teach this stuff sometimes in a way that I think is the most advantageous to guys just starting out, because you'll get in situations where, and I'll tell this on my seminar, I was like, okay, here's all these things you can do that are going to be attractive to women, but if you go out and you try to do all of them at the same time, you're going to look like an idiot. And, I don't want to see a bunch of guys moving around like, stoned octopuses, walking slowly through a place with their eyes like slits. And it's just going to look weird. But at the same time, if you can start implementing them and then sort of getting the reference experience to know when it's working, and you fine tune them and you put them all together, then it creates something very powerful. So it's interesting, how that all came about. But that was sort of how it gave me the idea and how I started with it. And it kind of just grew from there.
So don't look like stoned octopus. Those are amazing things. That's good advice.
That's the takeaway. That's the takeaway. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Yeah. It's especially tough. Like when you have all these things that you'll often learn here on boot camps, and it's just way too much to process. But the body language in particular, because there's such hardwired responses and actions, it's so difficult to unwind them and then rework them. I tell people this all the time, that it's a long haul to correct, to sort of small chunk these different changes and correct them along the way. So you have to commit to a fairly long journey. But if you do it, it's pretty awesome.
Well, especially with body language, you're working against a lifetime of bad habits. So it can be, definitely tough.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's habits that you basically developed from the time you were a little kid or even when you were a baby. So it's
Yeah.
really difficult. I want to keep talking about body language, but I need to shift to online dating because I know that is another area of your expertise, and you wrote a really cool book about it, again called The Gentleman's Guide to Online Dating. So let's transition to that subject really quickly. Why do you think online dating is so popular? Or what appeals to it? Or what is the appeal for men?
For men, okay. I mean, I guess the biggest appeal is that it's easy. It's having, gone are the days that you need to go out and spend a bunch of money and, go to the bar in order to meet women. I mean, obviously, I think guys should probably still be doing that because there's a certain element of socialization that's anchored to that you don't really get with online dating sites that you do need, especially once you meet up with them. But if, as long as you're keeping if you keep doing that and you still have a good socialization skills, online is an awesome way to sort of to add that, having all those women at your fingertips, going on to sites and having access to all those profiles, and even on your phone with apps like Tinder and stuff. You really, I mean, I when I'm doing boot camp and stuff, I'll take guys' phones while we're out, and maybe it's slow, and just start like burning off messages on Tinder and stuff. And it's pretty surprising how easy it is to get a group of girls to come meet up with you doing that. So there's not an excuse. There's no stigma attached to it anymore. I mean, most people nowadays are meeting online, so it's kind of the norm. So I think anyone avoiding at this point is either just lazy or is intimidated by it, I guess. But it's not difficult at all. It's pretty easy. There is, I guess, in most of the sites, depending on which ones you're using, there is sort of an upfront kind of a large amount of effort you got to put up front in terms of taking good pictures, writing a piece about yourself in the profile, and answering questions depending which site it is. But it pays off in the end because you're only really going to do that once. And then it just comes down to sending messages. And when I was doing it, I was doing it way more like 10 years ago is when I first started, I think, researching the book, or maybe like 7 or 8 years ago. I had basically just written a profile and didn't even really send messages. I would only talk to girls that had liked my profile or sent me a message. And that still worked out to get about 2 girls a day, served to me on a silver platter. And at the end of the week, that might be 2 girls out of the 14, I guess, if you count 2 a day. 2 of those 14 would be, past my standards of being attractive enough or cool enough or whatever. So that's not bad at all. Having 2 girls a week served you on a silver platter. Just going by my experience. So I didn't see any, there was nothing negative about that at all for me. And I still, it's even, if anything, it's easier now. So that's, I think, the main appeal there.
Damona Hoffman, the founder of Dates and Mates, I just had her on, and she mentioned the statistic that now, I think this is a current statistic according to her, 1/3 of all relationships begin online. So it's a huge number. Tons and tons of people are doing this. She was a bit reluctant to talk about particular dating sites and their pros and cons because of her partnerships with all these sites. Can you tell us a little bit about, can you give us your take on what are your favorite sites for this or for that or whatever?
Certainly I can do that. Okay, so first of all, it is gonna vary depending on the city you're in, and especially the country that you're in. But having said that, if you're in North America, this would be a pretty good guide, depending on some cities are outliers. But I would say that your bottom of the barrel site, which tends to have the most girls actually, would be something like Plenty of Fish. That would be, a step up from like Craigslist personal ads. So you're going to have a lot of people on there that are, that's basically like a hookup site essentially. So you're not going to find girls on there that may be seriously wanting to get into a relationship. Most of the ones on there will be there to pad their egos or to pursue a modeling career or basically, bot accounts. So there is a lot of bullshit when you get to the sites like that. When you're going up a few steps, you'll get to sites like OkCupid, which I think is an actually really good site to use, and that's probably where I'd start. That has tons of profiles in pretty much every city in North America for sure, if not the world. And then if you're in, OkCupid does have a bit more of a serious aspect to it. So people do go on there looking for serious relationships, but there's lots of girls just looking for friends and hookups and stuff like that too, although they may not put that. And then if you want to go even more serious, you get to sites like eHarmony, or Match.com, where they make you fill in a lot of questions in the beginning, and it's mostly geared towards people that are looking for serious relationships. And I think either one of them or both of them, girls get free profiles, but they may charge guys. I'm not sure. I haven't used that one in a while, but that one, like I said, it would be more serious. There's specialty sites. So, it's like JDate if you're, a Jewish person looking for a nice Jewish mate. And then there's ones that are specifically geared towards infidelity, Ashley Madison and sites like that. And then there's the one that I think everyone should be using, which is Tinder, which is kind of a combination in the sense that it is kind of like a hookup app. Like, it's not really like, you could probably get away with writing like a single paragraph for even if that for your bio. Most people, girls included, probably don't read profiles that often. They just kind of swipe if they like you, and that's most of the interaction there is going to be through kind of messages. So if you both like each other, you get to message each other, and then you take it from there. But the way that I use that site is mostly I use it when I'm already out, and I may say something like, maybe something silly to start out with, but eventually to just be something like, "What are you guys doing tonight? We're having a hilarious Disney karaoke night at this bar. You guys got to come and sing a song with us." Something like that, and maybe get them out as a group, or get them out, or maybe the single girl to come and meet you in your group. It works really well for that, because a lot of time people are using it while they're already out, and it is sort of based on location. So that you'll find that girls that are showing up are the girls that are right around your area. So often if they're out, they're going to be close by. So so those are the ones that I would probably use, start with, especially Tinder and OkCupid, and then depending on what you're after, or your religious denomination, you may choose some of the specialty sites.
I've also been using something called Hinge lately, which is it's kind of like Tinder, but it's the network of girls that you're matched with stems from your Facebook friends. It's never first degree friends, but it's either second or third degree, which is actually pretty cool. And it just automatically imports Facebook photos, has your Facebook information and stuff like that. So you really don't have to do anything for it, and it's been pretty cool. I like it a lot better actually than Tinder. So I would recommend that.
Someone just told me about that earlier today, actually. So this is twice in one day I've heard about this. So I feel like that's the universe's way of being like, check this app out. So I'm probably going to now.
It is awesome. Yeah, it's really cool. So what is like the major mistake, or the number one mistake that you see guys make when they're setting up when they're creating the written part of, let's say, their Match.com profile or whatever?
The written part specifically?
Yeah, the written part specifically.
That it's boring. I mean, the whole idea when you're writing a profile should be that you should be creating a window into your life that she could be a part of. So, and this is why I write in my book about how it shouldn't actually be written as if to convince the person who's reading it, like at least in like the first person, that you're a cool guy. You should almost be telling a story about your life and who you are, not in a way that says like, this is why you should like me, but more of like, this is just who I am in a sense of, these are the things that I do, the adventures I go on, the passions I have, but in the same way avoiding the cliches of like, yeah, I'm a pretty normal dude. I love dogs. I love drinking beer, going to the NFL game. I love, just like hanging with my buds and just like chilling out. I'm a pretty chill dude. Anyway, message me. Like, that's not going to give an emotional reaction to a girl unless she is really into the NFL or your friends, which is, not going to be likely. So you need to create an emotional reaction, and obviously that's going to really, how you do that depends on the kind of girls you're looking for. But there's obviously certain things that most women are attracted to. Having a very strong personality in the sense of, having things like you're a guy that goes after what he wants, that could be reflected in your job, hopefully reflected in your pictures. You're someone who is adventurous. You're someone who is, has a big social group. So having pictures where you're with a lot of friends, especially having women in there, not women that are hitting on you or that you're hitting on, especially. I guess if they're hitting on you, that's okay. But you don't want to put pictures of you like making out with a chick or having your hands all over a girl. But maybe a picture in which you're the center of attention, in which girls are smiling and looking at you. That works really well. You want pictures that tell a story, and your profile, to what you write should reference that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say there obviously has to be an amount of modesty and and a bit of humbleness to it, especially if you have a very good job and you're someone who has pictures and stuff that tend to paint a picture of a life that's quite extravagant. But at the same time, you do have to make it so that the women will get a reaction out of it, and that's what you want. I've always said that having a girl be pissed off at you is way closer to attraction than indifference. So you're better off even putting shit that you think will offend her than putting stuff that you think is going to bore her. So just as an example, not that you should go do that, but just an example of things you should be putting down there. It should be stuff that's going to create an emotional reaction. So things that I would talk about how the classic example I use in the book is something like I want to steal a pirate ship and I want to own my own private island. And have monkey butlers and build a treehouse like Swiss Family Robinson, and I just put like a bunch of stuff that's stupid, but there's like a dozen different things in there that she could jump on, and if she wanted to send a message, even if it's something as stupid as, oh man, I've always wanted to live on an island as well. Like that's easy for her to say that if I'm giving her a lot of options. Where it might be more difficult if all she's reading is how you like drinking and your dog and hanging out with your buddies. That doesn't really give her many opportunities. So yeah.
And really quickly, I know you touched on it a little bit, but I want to talk about pictures because obviously those are hugely important. Just give some general guidelines, like how many do you recommend, and what are the types of pictures that should be included?
I recommend. I mean, you should have a minimum of like 6, I'd say. I mean, as long as there's enough pictures that give you a good base. You want to have a picture of you maybe doing your job if it's particularly interesting. If not your job, if your job's not interesting, it should be a passion. Although if it's if you have both, that's good too. So if you are like a IT guy, which isn't necessarily the most interesting job as far as pictures go, but you love sailing, well, then maybe you have a picture of you in a sailboat doing that. So you're like I said, your picture should paint a life. Have pictures if you've traveled and you're a guy that loves traveling and loves particular places. You may have a picture of that. If you're someone that enjoys food and sort of the finer things in life, well, then you can have a picture of that. It's good to have a picture of you in like a power position. So maybe where you're in the center of a picture and there's a group of people laughing around you, or you're leading a conversation while everyone's watching you. Pictures with you as women obviously is going to be very important. If you have no pictures of you with other women are going to assume that you have no options. And obviously the opposite of that is true as well. So you want to have pictures of you with girls. It doesn't matter if they're not exceptionally hot. That's not really a big deal. Just as long as there are women in your life that you can really showcase in your photos. Don't try to avoid pictures of you alone. Having one is okay, maybe even 2, but try to avoid a bunch of pictures in a row where you're the only person in them. That's not necessarily going to be good as well. You probably want to avoid pictures where it's you and an obvious girlfriend being kind of all cuddly and stuff. That's not going to really give off the right. Women will see that and think that, oh, you made a point of showing that to show that you've had a girlfriend before, which really kind of communicates the opposite. The fact that you needed to show that. So yeah, that would be my quick and dirty kind of list.
All right. Thank you. That was amazing. So we've touched on online dating. We touched on body language. So this has been incredible. Cajun, thank you so much for coming on today. I know you got a busy schedule and you're running around Canada eating Canadian bacon, or as you guys call it, bacon.
Just bacon, yeah.
Yeah. And all these other fine delicacies in Canada. But I really appreciate you coming on. This has been super fun. If people want to reach out to you directly, how can they do that?
You can email me, Cajun at lovesystems.com. Even checking out lovesystems.com is, has all my boot camps and stuff on a schedule there, so you can check them out. I know I'm going to Singapore in like a couple weeks, and then I'm going to be going to down to Brazil and Rio, and then Mexico City, and then Vancouver and Toronto, and pretty much all over Australia as well. So check it out no matter where you are, and I'll probably be in your neck of the woods at some point soon.
Incredible. All right, so guys, once again, it's Cajun, And if you guys want to check out all the stuff that he mentioned, it will be in the show notes. You can see the show notes at www.lovesystems.com/podcast. And remember, new episodes come out every Monday, so constantly check back for new interviews with awesome guests. So that's it for today. Again, this is Hootie. See you next time. Peace.
Love, love, love systems. Love, 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 love systems. Love.